Hi, my name is Allison Roseman, and welcome to this third episode of, well, I guess the series has by default been named. We've been calling it Under Fives, so working title. Today, we are in the mile-square city of Hoboken, New Jersey, directly across the river from Manhattan. Hoboken is filled with history, from the very first recorded game of baseball being played here, to being the home of crooner Frank Sinatra, and currently the home of TLC's Cake Boss. Today, I would like to focus on just a snippet of history, that history that took place during the time of World War I. Today, Hoboken's waterfront is filled with parks, soccer fields, food trucks, but back in the late 1800s and much of the 1900s, it was a very popular port. It was very easy for large ships to dock here. The railroad was already established, and it was really easy to hop on a ferry coming back and forth between Manhattan behind me. And so it became a perfect spot for many shipping companies and luxury liners to dock their boats. The Hamburg American and North German Lloyd shipping companies were based here, both German companies. When war broke out in Europe in 1914, it became unsafe for German ships to cross the Atlantic as the British Navy held dominance over the seas and created a blockade for German ships. Many of those ships ended up stuck here, simply sitting in port. Perhaps the most famous of those ships is the SS Vaterland. In her day, she was a top luxury liner for travelers and the largest ship in the world. She was entering the New York harbor just as war broke out in Europe, and along with all those other ships, simply had to sit here to wait out the war. Then, in 1917, the United States joined the war, at which point the government seized all of those ships sitting in the harbor and repurposed them to send our troops off to Europe. Yep, even that luxury liner. This little square mile was suddenly shot into the spotlight as it became the main embarkation points for troops heading to Europe. Between the spring of 1917 and the fall of 1918, approximately 2 million American men and women passed through here. You may have never heard the slogan, "Heaven, Hell, or Hoboken by Christmas," but it became a national rallying cry across America, with troops and their families hoping for a swift end to the war. After the war ended, at the 11th hour on the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918, Hoboken became a major port for those returning from the war. Unfortunately, the American military had lost a number of those ships troops had been shipped out on, and it took a lot longer for troops to return than it had been for them to be shipped off to Europe. The last to return to Hoboken in the early 1920s were those who had lost their lives in the war. When all was said and done, Hoboken was left devastated and wouldn't recover until World War II. During the Depression of the 1930s, Hoboken was considered to be one of the poorest cities in the nation. The shipping industry that had helped this city develop was temporarily gone. Many of the local businesses had been forced to close during the war, and many of the city's residents had been forced to move out. Stick with me. In the late 1800s, Hoboken was flooded with immigrants. Many came with those German shipping companies that were taking over the docks. Others simply came to work. The two main groups of immigrants were Irish and Germans. In fact, there were so many Germans in this little square mile that the city was nicknamed Little Bremen after a city in Germany. When the United States joined the war on the side of the Allied forces, all German-born residents were required to register as enemy aliens. Many lost their jobs, lost their businesses, lost their homes, and about 2,000 were detained on Ellis Island, perhaps the most famous immigrant processing center in the United States. By the end of the war, Hoboken's German culture was gone, and in its place sprung up a group of Italian immigrants whose influence can still be felt today in the city's culture, from annual festivals to the city's famous homemade mozzarella. There is little evidence of that German culture that once helped shape this mile-square city. Thank you for joining me for this third episode of working title Under Fives. My name is Allison Roseman. Be sure to follow me so you don't miss any future episodes. And when I see y'all again, I will be in the warmer weather of the West Coast. So